Hello, everyone. TJ Schwartz here. Welcome back to the Edge and Flow podcast. I'm here with my co host, Lucas Burnley. You may notice my audio is not as good as it has been in the past. If you can remember the last episode by now, you would remember that I had a little better audio before. But I'm at the dining room table. We are recording middle of the week, yeah, middle-ish of the week, which we never do. Shops are loud. We're hiding off in our cubby, and we're going to talk about life. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm psyched to be recording again. Yeah, we have been we our time has been monopolized pretty effectively. We had started recording on Fridays at what, like 6 a.m. my
Six,
time,
7 my time. Yeah.
because that was like the window that you had before like machines fired up and employees were in, which was theoretically supposed to not be a shop day for you in general, but
Hmm.
started to overtake. So yeah, man, we got a lot to catch up. Like you and I have a lot to catch up on,
Yeah. Agreed.
which I feel like is always fun to record. Where should we
Hmm.
start?
Yeah, you have some new people.
Sure, man. Let's big big changes all around. So recap of year so far was that we bought an investment property with a shop, the goal
Hmm.
being to rent the house and then utilize the shop for kind of this expansion that I was seeing coming. Um, we added a new uh, Haas mill to that shop. Throughout all of this, as to be expected, there was a bunch of delays and like setbacks and like miscommunications. That part is like mill is on the ground with power. I have not turned it on. We have renters in the house. It is awesome. We've been able to use the apartment over the shop to like host family a couple times, and we've got friends coming to stay. So like that's super sick. And then hired part-time help who has worked out like fantastically. Um,
Great.
And basically, so I have him 2 days a week, 20 hours. So we're working two tens. And basically those are Kihoku days. So the days that he's in, we are just fully charging on the Kihoku. That is the application of the new shop, is basically going to be basically using the Kihoku as a format to get better at consistent output and production. Okay.
Mhm.
And then this year I've also been doing this like crazy push around social media, basically like filming with someone and then having them like edit post. We are now on a trial basis with someone internal who, again, looks like they're going to be a really, really good fit for the team. Primary focus is kind of around the management of our social media, product photography, some content creation, but is also like a good with his hands, like car and motorcycle guy who just loves being in shops. And so yeah, man, we've doubled the size of our team. Now it's not Maddie and me. It's four of us, and we're just really kind of trying to like figure it out.
So my only question after hearing all that is, what are you doing with all the free time you have right now?
um, yeah, that part hasn't settled in yet.
Right.
Um, what I will say though, in all honesty, what's been great is like I'm starting to see the light, like little pockets of light pop up, specifically with Isaiah in the shop as a shop assistant, is that he's picking up tasks really quickly and has ownership. So like recently we're still doing our Kydex like the old school way, like forming to the knife. Like I haven't moved it to a fixture yet, but Isaiah was able to handle the Kydex process from start to finish on a batch of 30 knives, from
Mhm.
sheet to assembly.
That's great. That's a big
Huge.
deal.
Yeah, he's really picking it up fast. And that that does actually create free time. That
Mhm.
allowed me to basically start to look at folders again and like start to go through the process and like make some minor improvements and start to run some parts. Um, in this though, to your point, we had to make one major strategic decision, and that was to cancel Blade for this year. And it was hard.
Mhm.
Um, but I just was like sitting there at the end of the week last week and I was looking at it and I realized like this is one of those areas where like you look at a situation and you can go, okay, I can do anything, right? But I can't do everything. You cannot do everything. And at some point in the decision tree, something has priority. Blade for us has always been important. It's a great way for us to connect with our customers. It's like the time that we see other makers. I like see the companies that I work with, but we've been charging so hard this year that the decisions we've made, while they like will yield, I think, the ability to be more effective around shows, it doesn't mean that we're there yet. And
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
just looked at it and I was like, man, I don't want to let off the gas. I don't want to I don't want to have to make all of my focus around just getting ready for the show. And I don't want to come back burnt out.
Dude, you've got an enormous amount on your plate. Machine, employees, new house that you acquired.
Yep.
You got kids. You were telling me you have a kid's birthday coming up, a big
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, you can't beat yourself up. I went through the same feeling with dropping out a Blade show this year, and um, yeah, it's just eventually you gotta make the call. And
It's like
I get
something
it.
has to
So
give.
yeah.
And it's this, I don't know if you do this too, but like basically until I really, really started to sit down and like weigh the pros and cons, I didn't take like I almost don't let the addition of obligation or like setbacks enter the conversation. So like all that's happening is I'm feeling really, really bad that I'm not where I need to be in Blade production without being like, well, okay, yeah, but we did this and we like this process took longer, or we've like hired and trained employees. And I'm like, why am I behind? This is ridiculous. I'm such a slacker. And I just had to look and like almost basically just make like a list. And I was like, okay, I've actually done like I look at it and I'm like, I've done enough for like this first half of the year.
Mhm.
And that kind of was the takeaway, is that like you and I have talked about this quite a bit, which is like you can't exist in a growth phase 100% of the time. The first half of this year has been like insane growth. Like in not, again, man, like around like the property, that was a 5-year goal that I put together inside of a year. And
Mhm.
it was an opportunity that popped up and it worked, but it wasn't the right timing. Like I wasn't like flush with cash to like buy a property. Like Matt and I made it work.
Mhm.
Um, it, it it's separate though in the way where it's like when we have these goals that we're trying to achieve around like our work, it's so easy to just focus on those, even as like you're doing things around them. I don't know. Like, do you find that?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, the growth question, I keep bringing it up. I think I've mentioned it on other podcasts that we've done, but it's the amount of throttle that you are willing to give to the business is consequential on pretty much all other sides of life.
Yes.
And sometimes the business, it almost asks for the throttle. It's like you didn't even make that decision. It just sort of, it's just the way the lay of the land was. You just hit the gas, and it just made it. It almost seems dumb not to sometimes,
Yeah.
and so you have to like come around to almost resisting the way the world's pushing you in that way, to conserve, that that energy and that ability to have peace, like in your personal life or with family or other things like that. And so, yeah, I'm coming to the similar conclusions that, the business, I have to decide how fast I want it to grow. It's not just running wild on its own and I have to keep up. That's not a good idea. You know what
That's
I
not,
mean?
that's letting the business
Yeah.
run you. Well, it's almost like, to use your throttle analogy, it's like having, it's like having self-generating horsepower. It's like
Hmm.
you start to put your foot down and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's a little more. Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do, I do actually want to feel this go faster.
Hmm.
You're not in the Ford Festiva,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
That turbo lag
Yeah.
slows for a second, then all of a sudden the turbo
It's
catches
just
and you just
like,
want to stomp on it.
man,
Yeah. It's
it
just,
really is. So that basically right now, over the past few days, I think I was running on adrenaline because I've been running 7 days a week for the majority of the year. um, my sleep schedule has been crazy. For the majority of that time, I was doing like pretty good around like self care. The last month, like my fitness process has kind of like dipped where I'm missing gym days. I'm like missing surfing. Like I'm just noticing, like
mhm,
I'm making judgments that are based around the work and not around my life. And so I'm I'm kind of trying to let like the decision around Blade kind of come to a natural stop. But the goal from this point forward is now like not to focus on any type of like growth or new exciting fun project, but to stabilize
mhm,
all of the things that we've built. Now I just want to
mhm,
stabilize from the growth
mhm.
and like get that running smooth.
Yeah. Tie up all the loose ends.
Yeah, tie up loose ends and like I'm really bad about that because I get excited about projects or I get excited about like I don't know the exciting work. But a lot of times what that means is that I leave things like half or three quarter 80% done, you know.
Mhm,
Not like from a completion standpoint of a product, but like it would, I might not finish a landscaping project before I move on to like building something out of metal because that's more fun. And I'm like, well, it's like
mhm,
working. So I'm trying to look at this and just be like, okay, take a kind of take a, overview of what we've kind of like put into place and then just let that be enough. Learn. I mean, the show thing is really a tricky one because the way that I did shows for years isn't viable now. But I'm still learning that, and it's
mhm,
a lot. I mean, it's a lot of years of muscle memory of kind of like creative fervor and like getting ready for a show inside of a month or month and a half. And now it's like the cost downstream is just too high and the risk is too high. And, I can't take time off after a show. I've got to get back in and we've got employees now. And it's like, so the way that I think that process has to happen, that's like where I'm going to put the work in that I would have put into Blade is basically like, okay,
mhm,
what's
mhm.
the next thing we have? How can I not be in this position? how can I make the most out of that and be excited about it? And like, you know, yeah. So,
Yeah, certainly. Well, I will miss Atlanta this year. I'm sure you will, but for anyone out there listening, we'll be back.
yeah, this
We'll be
is
back.
long term, like shows. I've always like, I've always thought that shows, you should actually vary them. Okay. Um, Blade's a hard one, you know, and again, I think this is, I don't know if newer makers are view it in the same way, but like for a long time, it's like Blade has been like, if you're going to do one show, you go to Blade, right?
Hmm.
Because it's the industry show. And this is, if you want to be, you know, if you want to do collaboration, if you want to do production, if you want to learn a bunch of stuff, like if you want to network, like that's the level of show. Otherwise, there's a lot of small shows that, you know,
Hmm.
can drive to and provide a show experience. But this was,
Hmm.
Blade was like, if you're a hustler, you're going to Blade,
Yeah. Okay.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, man, I don't know. We'll see. Everything in its season, like right now, like you mentioned the kid thing, like a show going right into the beginning of summer. If you're not dialed, like it's hard. Like we're getting, that means
Hmm.
I've got, you know, two kids' birthdays, which, you know, I want to be able to focus on. We've got like school events, and then we drop right into summer. And like
Hmm.
there's, it's hard to, it's hard to utilize all the resources for a show. So
Yeah. Yeah.
the one thing I will say that in the past, like I've canceled shows just out of kind of being reactive and just real, like basically 20 plus years of doing shows. I think I've canceled somewhere around like four or five. And I want to say all of those have been since 2020. As
Hmm.
like I canceled the show in the pandemic. Like there was just times where we were
Hmm.
moving, and but all of this stuff coincides with like moves, kids, you know, changes. And so I just have to
Yeah.
look and be like, well, yeah, this is not a by choice thing. But the upside here was that I did, I've started realizing the kind of the downstream cost of shows from a stress standpoint. And so I put a pretty hard deadline on this one. I worked past my deadline that I had set for myself, but I started to feel it and I caught it. And I was really proud of myself for being like, I made a deadline. I didn't achieve my goal. I'm now fighting a weak position. Now I need to really look at this, why I'm making this choice. So
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, slow learning, but learning.
Yeah. Hey, it's part of it.
It's part
And
of it,
uh
man.
and one of the things on your plate that we could dive into too is you have a guy come out to help you with the Haas on that same week. Is that correct?
Yeah. And that again, man, like it just everything stacked. So yeah, Haas is sending out a tech to do like a day of training with me. I think I like went back and forth on it. And at the end, I was like, nope, I want help. It's a brand new machine. It's a new generation control. I'm not a machinist. I've never used a probe. Like I just saw, I'm like, if I can get someone to come and like hold my hand through a few things, I feel good about that. And
Hmm.
that was actually one of the things like that was a setback, was that was supposed to happen with the install of the machine. Um, the install got delayed, delivery got delayed, install got delayed, and then when they were doing the install, there were delays because they got like a faulty fuse. Um, but basically, it took the tech couldn't fix it, and then they had someone new in the office they were supposed to overnight the tech apart, and I get a phone call the next day asking why I haven't paid for the part. And they're like, we were going to send it, but you haven't called in and paid the invoice. And I was like, your tech ordered the part and he's in a hotel right now, so you might want to talk to him.
Yeah. Whoa.
So basically that blew his schedule, delayed another week. He came back, set it up. But it's just like, you can't, there's a point where like, I can't change that. Like
Mhm.
so, yeah, basically Hostech is coming the day that I would have been flying home from Atlanta.
Yeah.
So
Yep. I think you made the right call, man.
I think
Yeah,
so.
it's one thing I've noticed about manufacturing is you can't be in manufacturing without a vendor network.
Yeah.
Um, we do a few things with like heat treat and obviously steel supply and stuff, but you can bring as much as you want in house, but someone's still got to make the steel, someone's got to make the raw materials, someone's got to do, make your machinery or whatever. And
Yeah.
so it's amazing how the more complex your operation gets and the more the vendor network gets involved, you learn the value of a really good vendor. You learn the value of um, setting yourself up to not be overly dependent on vendors sometimes or have a diversification of vendors. And
Yeah.
yeah, dealing with vendors is way bigger a part of my job these days than what I would have guessed.
Yeah.
It's super interesting.
Well, that's just the idea that like scale scale is not one dimensional. There's
Mhm.
n- there's no way, I mean maybe sometimes, but essentially if you scale one process, it scales things around it and not necessarily the obvious ones.
Mhm.
Like you might just spend more time talking to vendors,
You're right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. This was an interesting week with vendors the last 2 weeks, I guess. We had ordered material from a vendor, upstanding vendor, no complaints about them. Um, Waiting on the invoice, waiting on the material, blah, blah, blah. And I get a charge on my card in the amount that I would expect probably that order is going to be. So I don't really think too much about it. 2 weeks go by and I get an invoice from the vendor saying, "Hey, you never paid for that material." And I'm like, "Well, there's a charge matching the amount exactly, like to the penny. We're talking large, like 3 grand."
Mm-hmm.
Well, turns out it was fraud,
Oh.
and it's not even a bank that this vendor uses. And yeah, but it matches the amount on an invoice that I didn't
Oh.
yet have when the transaction occurred. So I had to go through a bunch of loops with my bank, with the vendor, with this, with that. So it's still an open investigation, but I had to, deactivate the card, do all this. So, and then only shortly after I get a contact from my heat treater that we have possibly a steel mix up. So we have some knives that were heat treated that appear to not be the steel we thought it was. So both of those happened in short
Whoa.
succession. So yeah, it's stuff like that that I don't know what the fraud situation was. I don't blame them for that, but perhaps something was stolen on their end, my
Right.
information or something.
Right.
And then the steel still don't know on that, but this is pretty normal. I've come to realize. I mean, those
Yeah.
two are unique situations, but it's always a unique situation. You know what I mean? It's
No,
you're
there's
kind of
literally always a
yeah,
problem.
yeah, your business is kind of married to a bunch of partners
Yeah.
that you don't have control over, you know what I mean? So it's like you always have that, their problems become your problems and vice versa. That's just sort of the way it works. So
I'm usually grateful when a problem arises in a new relationship because for me, like, people will like, oh, I'm so sorry this happened, or like, this isn't like normal. It's like, no, 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 no. Like, problems are given. How you fix them, that makes them unique, I think, right?
mhm,
Or like,
that's
that's
accurate.
that is what makes a good vendor partner. Like, okay, we had a problem, how do we solve it? Like,
Yeah. Mhm.
because if you can't
Yeah.
make it past that, then there's no value,
Yeah.
yeah. It's that's there's definitely a little bit of that for me going on right now, just from like a volume standpoint. I'm amazed. Like we just went through our Kydex order and I was like, oh, like lasted me like a year. Like,
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden it's like, oh man, I gotta like redo it. Like I'm finally starting to do Kanban
Mhm.
out of necessity.
Yeah.
not out of because I think it's a cool idea, because I actually am seeing now like, oh, we need this or we're going to run out of
Yeah.
parts.
Yeah, I honestly think if we weren't running the Kanban system, I could see our business being like 50% smaller because of it. I mean, it's so important to us that I honestly think we would be overnighting stuff almost every day because we created a spreadsheet that contains like the links to all the Kanbans. Because there was a time I didn't know how many Kanbans we had because somebody would fire a Kanban, submit it to me, I'd order it, put it back. So I never could see all the Kanbans we
Overall, yeah,
created.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I started making a spreadsheet to clean it up. And it's like we probably have 100 Kanbans in the shop or close to it. And it's stuff, it's like sandblast cabinet. Sometimes the glove gets holes in it. We have a Kanban for that glove so that we don't end up without a sandblaster and have to overnight a glove. So it's stuff like that. And the amount of Kanbans that I order, if we didn't have the Kanban, those would all be under duress or a large
Yeah,
percentage.
yeah.
And I couldn't imagine not having it. Honestly, I don't even, the fact that some people do it without it and they scale a business without it, I would love to see how they're doing it because I don't see it doesn't seem possible, but obviously it is.
Doesn't seem possible. Yeah. And I'm moving like I am not organized. My brain is not organized in that way. I've never made a spreadsheet. I'm starting to like realize again, like just this is evolution. Like there's things
Mhm.
that I need to learn if I want to move forward. So yeah, the Kanban system is like right now for us is it's like same prototype system, but I've got parts that I need, goes in there. We're kind of adapting. I'm learning like what the numbers are. I'm learning how to use it, and we're still in this hybrid model where like part of it is this like just full custom shop where I can like go over to some, random drawer and grab some Damascus and make a custom. But I'm also have, 1,000 of some standoff now. And I'm trying
Mhm.
to figure out how to that I can't interact with those two things the same way right now.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I'm so used to being flexible. Like in the past, there's almost no delay of a vendor or like a machine going down that would stop us or me at that point, right? Because
Mhm.
I could just do something different. And I'm kind of like looking at the new system, and I like I like that ability to flex. And I think there's always I will always try to maintain some element of that. But I
Mhm.
also realize that like, okay, that you have to build like redundancy around like the functional productive
Yeah.
systems.
Yeah.
It can't all be problem solving. Like,
Yeah, exactly. And things like, hardware screws, barrels,
yeah,
sharpening belts for your sand
yeah,
belt grinder. It's like there is no creativity there.
yeah,
Not combining it is it doesn't really gain you anything on like the
yeah,
product side. Where I'm careful about with the Kanbans is like if you're starting to Kanban things that when it's Kanban, you're just going to depend on it and you're not going to be creative after that.
yeah,
One example is like, let's say Cerakote paint or like handle material. If you Kanban it, you're just going to have a likelihood of going on autopilot and they could release a new color and you just wouldn't even notice because you never pay attention. You just trust the Kanban.
great, great,
So
great example.
it can make you go stale if you've Kanban things that are what directly impact the creativity side.
Yeah.
And so you got to be a little careful, and that's with our weekly drops. We don't Kanban that stuff for a reason. As soon as you Kanban it, then you're relying on it and you're in a rut. So we Kanban everything that's in our configurator, standard order stuff. And
Hmm.
then every week we're just doing something random. And some of it we use a lot of, and you would think, oh, for efficiency's sake, I should Kanban that. But I've decided not to just so that we don't have, yeah, it's more problem solving, but the Kanban can trap you in a way. So,
I love that. Well, and that's efficiency in general where like I keep telling myself like let the efficient things be efficient. But like my goal is not I don't need to make everything efficient. I just don't. And
mhm,
with Kanban, I mean around that, you can even look there and be like, well, okay, we know we like to have X amount of handle material that's wild card, but that
mhm,
itself you can Kanban that. You'd be like, we need 50 sets of scales, but I'm not going to specify what that material is. But
Hmm.
when you're
Hmm.
out of it, you still need to order it, and
Yeah.
there's things like that, I think, where I'm finding where I'm like, okay, the creativity can stay there, the flexibility, but I do have to have some solution, right?
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know, man. It's fun. I'm very excited right now to we're still like riding this middle line of constantly figuring things out based on the way that I was doing, and then slowly little areas of efficiency. I'm starting to see it, and I'm seeing space around it.
Hmm.
And right now
Hmm.
I'm very excited to kind of just dig into that and just make the next round of improvements. Like, like we're talking about Kydex, and that's a great example of something where it's like it would be so easy for me to just keep doing it exactly the way we're doing it. And with like a big show looming, I'm not going to make the changes during that. I'm going to count that I'm going to have time to do it after. Whereas
Hmm.
now I can look at it and I can just say, like, okay, this now becomes a scheduled task.
Hmm.
I'm going to spend, next week or whatever, like making the improvement. And that feels really good.
Nice.
Because it feels like time. That feels like being able to choose how I'm scaling or how I'm focusing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
dude,
Lots of problems to solve.
what a year, man. I mean,
I
it's we're 5 months in.
I took a personality test this last week because I kind of have fun doing that kind of stuff, and it there was something about it, I couldn't quote it, but it said something about you enjoy problem solving. And I was like, yeah, I do, but thank God I do, man, because if
Oh,
I didn't, yeah, this would be interesting. But I do like it. I do like solving problems. Sometimes you get like just too many at once, but
right.
uh, it's
Do you
better
get
than
decision fatigue? Like, do
yes.
you get, if
That's
you
my like
get, yeah, like
that's my
not
biggest
being,
problem.
does it incapacitate you, or can you get like deer in the headlights when you're like, okay, I know I need to work on this. I need to work on this. I want to work on that, and then end up doing nothing? Or are you always able to pick a path?
Um, I'll have to think about that a little bit. I feel like I'm able to push through it pretty well. I think where it affects me is just in my like overall, I don't know, mood. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
It's like I like solving problems, but then eventually when the hopper gets too full of problems to solve, like my mood is impacted because
Yeah.
it feels endless. You know what I mean? So there's a little bit of that. Seems like yeah, I feel pretty good about being able to jump on it and just start solving them. But yeah, there's some of them. The ones that get me are the ones where it's like I have a theoretical problem or a theoretical solution to a problem, but it's the time horizon's really long and I can't actually make it happen fast.
Too
And
nebulous.
so yeah, you're kind of like in a hurry up and wait.
Yeah.
Those are frustrating, but yeah, I mean, I'm glad that it's something I like doing, solving problems, because that's what business is at the end of the day. So it's working.
Yeah. Yeah. You just want to be solving the right problems.
Yeah.
The time horizon thing is, I think, for me, very relevant. Um, and again, like with ADHD, I can focus, I can get tasks done, but if a problem is like too open ended, I find a lot of ways to not do it. And so
Yeah.
I think that's why I've done shows the way I've done them for so long, is because at a point the show becomes the most important problem to solve, and
Hmm.
like hyper focus kicks in and I get it done
With a hard deadline too.
with a hard deadline. But up until that point, it's nebulous. I know I need to get ready for the show, but I don't have, it's not like then there's a hard deadline, but the deadline is far enough away that it's not an immediate threat. And
Hmm.
so I'm kind of trying to learn to break things down into like there's some accountability. And to be honest, I don't know. I know that I need the stress around a show. if I want to really do good creative work. At least that's what it feels like. But I feel like there's maybe a way to kind of can some of that,
Hmm.
like put in some false deadlines. I don't know. I don't know if my brain will like accept that as an that's like
Yeah.
gonna know like that's not a real deadline. Like,
What you need to do is call Blacho staff and have them send you an email with false deadlines
yeah,
and
dude.
and not and not send you the emails with the actual deadlines.
Yeah, like we have to like, I don't know, man. I feel like I have to trick my brain into some I've been doing it since I was a kid. Like I did it around saving. Like one of the
Hmm.
first things I did, I remember was like I wouldn't spend I wouldn't spend anything under a $5 bill. So basically, to buy anything, I had to spend $5. But then now I couldn't spend what I had under that, so I would save it.
Hmm. That's
It's
interesting. Yeah.
always been hacks like that to like get
Hmm.
things done. And now I like I understand why, but at that point I didn't.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
what else? Do we spend a lot of time talking about what I got going on? What's going on in the shop? You just dropped a new model extension, right?
Yes, correct.
Give us a
The
little
model,
background on it.
the Overland X
Okay.
is our newest model. It falls squarely between the classic original Overland and the Overland Sport. And the reason for that idea is that the Overland is like a clear cut belt knife. You're not going
Yep.
to in pocket the Overland. I mean, I've seen someone do it, but it's almost
Sure.
like kind of to be funny. You wouldn't
Right.
really typically do that. And then the Overland Sport is clearly a in pocket fixed blade.
Right.
It's 90% of people, that's how they're carrying it. And but it is small. It's very small. It's like a 2.7 inch blade, 6.5 inches overall. And it didn't feel that small because I was so used to it. But then I made the Overland X, and now the Overland Sport feels like a mini knife. And so, which is kind of the goal because it really is a mini knife. And so the Overland X is in pocket available. So it's like we made sure that we weren't going to oversize it to where you couldn't
Right.
in pocket it because that's kind of a hard cutoff for a lot of people that buy knives. And so I've carried it in pocket and it's really comfortable in pocket, but it's pushing towards the upper limit of in pocket so that you could have a lot of guys have said that they have big hands and the Overland Sport. They either bought one and it was just a little bit too small for the big handed types, or they just told me like, hey, when you make a little bit bigger one, I'll buy it. But I can already tell I like a little bit bigger handle. So the Overland X is that, and we launched it 2 weeks ago as a configurator. We did limited quantities. So basically, we're trying to ramp up into production without sinking ourselves or overcommitting. So we just did a brief period through the mailing list of sales to get custom orders in. We are shipping those this week by and large, it looks like. And that those orders came in last week. Yesterday, we did our second offering to bring in the next group of custom orders so that we could start on those this week, ship next week, ideally. So we're going to kind of keep doing that leapfrog for a little bit and just make sure that we're not going to get caught with some issue that
Yeah.
we weren't prepared for. So like sheath fitment and all these, we spent a lot of time dialing it in, but I have learned that doing one, three, four, five of any one thing is just not that much data.
Yeah.
And it's not until you do it week in and week out that you find the boundaries of some of the tolerances. You find that, oh, this sheath worked when we made it last week, but if the scales are a little bit thinner on the thinner side of the tolerance, like it feels a little different. And you kind of have to just move through that without being buried. At least
Just
that's my plan.
repetitions,
Yeah, get the
man. I
reps
mean,
in
it
at a
is.
little bit lower quantities without promising too much. And because we could always, open it wide open, and then if it gets to be a larger number, we could just extend the lead time.
Yeah.
That's just a slippery slope.
Yeah, but you
So
don't know the that's the thing. You don't know the
yeah.
problems. Well, and I saw you developed, I was watching you work through the sheath, the new mold.
Mhm.
Dude, and like, I mean, that's genius. And that's the right kind of problem solving. And I would imagine for you, that's like engaging problem solving. Like you're psyched to be
Yeah.
doing that, you
Yeah,
know? And
definitely.
I think that is externally, like you'll see people wonder, like, oh, like why are you doing the same model? Or why are you continuing this? The I as a maker, I think that sometimes with like a known format, that's where you're able to really make huge strides in like your understanding or your process, because
Hmm.
now you're able to focus on like this one element. When I saw you working on the sheath mold, that was like, I saw two things. One, you're messing with a bunch of different textures for the scales. Okay.
Hmm.
That goes downstream from this model forward because now you're like, oh, okay, we have all these new textures on lock. But also you have the new sheath like mold, process that also goes downstream. And it's like, that's a huge amount of development, but you utilized kind of a known format to achieve
Hmm.
it. I really, I
Yeah.
really like that.
Well, thanks. Yeah, yeah, we love doing our weekly drops. It's become a really core part of our business over the last 6 or 8 months. And so with the Overland Sport and the Overland, our weekly drops, we are mainly doing different finishes and materials,
Mm-hmm.
but not we aren't very free to play with the scales in like 3D ways.
Right.
Like you mentioned, either texture or maybe there's an extra thick version of the scale or an extra thin version of the scale
Right.
or like a super slim whatever. And it's because of the sheath molding. It's to your point, we had those other models set up as kind of like permanently sheath
Yeah.
molding off of this one shape. And I wanted to unlock that potential for the weekly drops of this knife to where we could just kind of reconfigure and have a modular sheath mold that would accept weird handles of unknown.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even right now picture what they would be, but I just wanted to have it ready. And so that's what we plan to do is on the weekly drops with that knife, eventually we could have some unique texture on a unique material, on a unique Cerakote color, whatever. And it's just kind of an exponential increase in the variability that can happen with that. And so we launched it with like a pretty broad, aggressive texture. And it's a little bit more of a maybe some people wouldn't like that much texture, but I wanted to come out pretty strong and heavy with the texture to kind of illustrate the differences with that knife, that this is going to
Mm-hmm.
be more of a texture playground. And so what we could go back and do a smooth version that's a lot more like the Sport, but we could go all different directions. So
Yeah,
that's
I
it's
think
ready
I
for
think
that.
long game to me that I think that's survival. And again, if we look at knives and you just think, okay, someone is buying a knife as a tool, they need it, and that's the one that they're going to buy, like you're shooting yourself in the foot. Like we know that the market is like passion driven. And
Mhm.
so like colors, sizes, textures, materials, like those are all things that are interesting to people. If you give people
Mhm.
options, like you extend that ability, you know.
Mhm.
Um, so I think I'm like super happy to see you doing that.
Mhm.
You know, I keep trying to like when I look at what I'm doing now, I'm like, okay, what is it that I love about making like one-off customs? And then how do I integrate some of that into like a more production minded process? And I think I see areas where it's just there are constant areas that allow for creativity, even
Mhm.
in even in an efficient kind of production environment,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know? So yeah, it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, yeah, that is kind of the trickiest part of building out manufacturing is if you want to just make the one knife exactly the same, no changes, you have a very small number of variables doing it that way and you can control it. You can have, more cost effectiveness and all
Yeah.
that. And that's one way to go. It's kind of the Henry Ford quote, like you can have any
Yep.
color you want as long as it's black.
Yep.
But designing the process to be nearly that efficient, but also have these flexibility points that you've decided, on ours, different materials, that's not that big a deal, but to have the different textures available,
Yeah.
that's not something we've really had. So it's the process of the product. It's
Yeah.
designing this process so that this family of the Overland X is going to be wider than before. So,
Dude, well, and this is like the choose your own adventure component of this, and where preconceived notions, I think, start to fall short, right? Is we have ideas around manufacturing or what production means, and it's based on what you see other people do, right? Again, to reference Chris Reeve, like, and the way that they work, like they allow for variations that they can do in small amounts, and like they're efficient, but they
Mhm.
will still do things that feel just incredibly custom.
Yeah.
And to me, that is, I'm like, oh, that's what I want. That's the way. That is much more interesting than the Ford model, And like
Yeah.
right now, I'm reading which one, Taichi Ocho or one of the like Toyota production, and you realize like the difference between the way that Toyota worked and the way that Ford worked,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And I think that for us, that like Toyota method is much closer, right? That desire to be able to like change midstream, like make something cool, make something different, bring in a prototype, but still have that be efficient.
Yeah.
Um, really, really ties in. And
Yeah.
that's, I mean, as a like what I would consider like I still think of myself as a custom knife maker. I think that is like the fear point of like, but I don't want to make only one thing and have that dictate, like, have the
Mhm.
process dictate like what it is. And I'm
Yeah.
realizing like you don't actually have to. That you
Yeah.
do get to pick that.
Yeah. Yeah. It requires a lot of thought and kind of anticipation of what you might want to do and where to add the
Yeah.
flexibility points. It's like it's sort of you make a knife or a design or whatever it is with a set of sliders on it, and you're like, I
Yep.
know if there's enough sliders that will give me enough creative ability down the road
Down. Yep.
that I'm going to have fun with this,
Yep.
And so it's like you just want to put more sliders. It's just like a video game, the character
Yeah.
creation. The more sliders, the more possibilities. Like design those in at some point.
Ooh, that's a really good analogy. I gotta sit with that one just because it is that from a design standpoint is a really powerful tool when looking at the potentiality of a product. Like,
Mhm.
what do I want to be able to do with it? And I think for me, a lot of times that's been organic in like if we use a Cypop as an example, right? It's like the Cypop was one shape and I made that. I made it for a while and then I was like, oh, I can like change the front of that, but everything else stays the
Mhm.
same. Okay. And then it's like from there, you start to see like another level where you can change, like, oh, I can change the thickness or I can change. Now we've changed the size, you know,
Mhm.
multiple. Now we have a big one and a small one, and we have ones that are multiple pieces, but it wasn't by design. And so I think at this point, you could look at almost anything and be like, where is the value to be able to change? Like, this is a funny one. I love when I design folders, I like to design them to fit multiple blade shapes. Okay.
Mhm. Great example.
What is crazy to me is that very rarely, when those knives are collaboration knives, do the other blade shapes ever get used. And I think it's because there's a thought that they will cannibalize something that is already working well. So I don't know if that's like a viable one, but in my mind, that would be an example of that lever. Like, oh, if you have the Kwaiken basically fits the Kwaiken blade. Okay. The Kihon fits like six different blade shapes. And that
Mhm.
was actually by design. So if you run that filter through like a fixed blade, it starts to be like pretty fun.
The only thing I'm jealous about when it comes to folders is folders are a lot easier to make, or folders are a lot harder to make,
Yeah.
but they have one huge liberty, which is that they don't have sheaths. And so
Dude.
that is one thing about the Kydex is, man, I'd love to have that kind of mentality where one of the sliders that I have is on the blade shape. But if you're moving a slider and you're redesigning sheath systems for that, oh man, like that's one I haven't cracked that code of how you would do that to where your fixtures and your sheath making could adapt. Whereas a folder, as long as the edge is concealed, you know what I mean? It doesn't really care. Um,
Hmm.
yeah,
You know
which
what's you know what's interesting? When I saw what you were doing with sheaths, I saw like, okay, you could like looking at the turn, it's like you could go skeletonized to scaled. on that fixture because you could
Yeah.
essentially have like your skeletonized version and then you add your scale component. Now you can make two sheaths off of that mold within a range of blade shapes, tip shape, something like that. There's probably, you could probably do the same thing
Hmm.
with a modular blade element.
Hmm.
Obviously there's like a window no matter what, but, but man, you just, this stuff is all iterative. It's like the more you learn, the more it's the horsepower equation,
Hmm.
right? Like, it's like, oh, you've got more horsepower. Like, oh, here's more. It,
Hmm.
it's really pretty fun. I don't know that the ability to make weird one-off stuff is super enticing to me still. You know who does actually I think does a pretty good job of this as like a bigger production company is Microtech.
Hmm.
I feel like I feel like that is because like Tony wants to make something. Emerson too, right? Like Emerson is building customs based off of probably parts that are coming out of the production line, taking
Hmm.
those and then building customs.
Hmm.
Um, I saved a few Kihokus back to hand grind because I want to do a few like I want to do some daggers because it's sick.
Hmm.
Like, man,
Hmm.
I just want to do big old deep hollow grinds on them. You know,
Hmm.
eventually will I be able to cup wheel grind that? Like, yeah, probably. Can't do it
Hmm.
today, but in my brain, I'm like, ooh, same thing with the handle textures. That like the handle textures is one that I'm stuck on right now because I see a bunch of variations and I'm like, well, right now, not the time to change it. Like
Yeah.
I'm not there yet, you know?
Yeah. 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 It's a fun way to look at it. Set up efficiency that allows for the playground activities as well. And yeah, now I've got my gears turned and thinking about blade shapes and what would have to be. You'd almost have to have interchangeability on those fixtures, sort of like what the scales are, but you'd have to have some forgiveness built into the fixtures that would allow you like a certain envelope. Like if you can design a new blade as long as it's in this range, it's
Yeah.
no wider than this or longer than this or something
Yeah.
like that. And you could sort of think ahead and I just like kind of learned this from you, line extensions and the growth of a product when it
Yeah.
comes to 5 years from now, we could be making an Overland X that's
Yeah.
different than the one now,
Yeah.
and it's still an Overland X, and
Yeah.
all throughout could be this gradient of just changing things
Yeah.
and making them interesting. And that on the sport has worked really well so far. And it's mostly been materials and colors, though. So
Yeah.
taking it to the next level is very exciting.
Man, it really is. And that, that has always intrigued me because I'll notice that I have certain things that like a product where it's sticky to me.
Hmm.
I don't get tired of it. I don't get tired of making it or thinking about it. And I would say the common thread is probably that ability to evolve it,
Hmm.
but inside of like a recognizable kind of,
Hmm.
format. Um yeah, it's and I think too there's a huge amount of value in that. Is there value in like short runs or like doing something wild? Like, yeah, absolutely. Not the type of value that I want. Like I'm as a custom maker, even even early on, I didn't work that way because if
Hmm.
I liked something enough to make it, I probably wanted to make it again.
Hmm.
Right. Maybe tweaked a little bit.
Hmm.
But like I've always had like like standard models and then variations on those models. And I think
Hmm.
it's fun. The goal right now is we're close. So as soon as the second machine is up and running, I think what my plan is going to be. So right now we've got one machine in shop A, one machine in shop B. Basically, as soon as the machine in shop B is running, shop A machine is going to go there too. because I think it makes sense to
Mhm.
have both the current machines in the same place.
Mhm. It does.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, right. And just,
Hmm.
I mean, I will probably at some point need a third machine in the like, I don't know, development. We don't know, like
Hmm.
R&D lab side of the
The skunk
business.
works. Yeah.
Yeah, Skunk Works or Squirrel Works in my case.
Hmm.
But that's kind of the thought. And then as I'm getting back into folders, I think the plan is I can't afford the time to get the folders right now like as efficient as the Kihoku, and I don't think it warrants it. Again, going to that 80% thought, it would be really easy to be like, okay, I know how to make these changes. I'm going to stop doing it on the Kihoku and move to folders. I don't want to. So I'm basically like
Hmm.
it's weird game of leapfrog where you get something efficient and then something else is inefficient.
Hmm.
But now is not the time to fix that other thing. You have to like refine the first job.
Hmm.
I don't know. I really like watching the way that you guys have worked and the way that you've started your shop is like there's an element of me where I'm like I wish that I could do that and I can't, right? But there's so much that I can learn from it and kind of just see like okay, I have to compartmentalize because I can't bring everything over all at once. But
Hmm.
it it is really it's fun, man. Like working with Isaiah and seeing him get psyched about like ownership of a process and being like, okay, I know how to do that. Like I can start this start to finish. And like the
Hmm.
satisfaction that comes from going from raw material to a finished part is so cool.
Yeah.
That starting to streamline that has felt so good.
Yeah. I bet.
Less
Yeah.
of a wild card.
And also looking at it through, you're kind of relearning it through his eyes in a way,
Yep.
is what I've noticed, is like
Yep.
you question the decisions you've made about how you do things more readily when you're teaching it to someone else because you try to explain why you're doing X, Y, and Z, and you can't explain it.
Yep.
And you would have just assumed that's fine until you had to explain it to someone else. And then you realize, well, that actually doesn't make sense. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it helps refine the way you look at those things as well.
Yeah, I would say that like learning, like teaching is the best way to learn. Like you will
Mm.
100% get better at anything you do by teaching somebody else to do the same thing. It just makes
Yeah,
you
yeah.
look at your process. I think a lot of times now when I'm teaching things that are like more like soft skills, right? It I really have to look at because it's like years and years of muscle memory and like the just the way that I've done something and then looking at it and being like, this literally makes no sense to teach someone
Uh,
to do it this way.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what am I? So does that mean it makes sense for me ever? Or like, yeah, that's a funny process, man. But
Hmm. Hmm.
uh yeah.
Yeah,
What else?
yeah.
Are we got anything else? That feels like a pretty good I feel like that's like a pretty good recap, catch up.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um we did our annual turkey hunting trip. We got skunked. Uh,
We did hear turkeys. We did see turkeys. We did drink wild turkey. So
yeah.
I
And
don't know if that.
meanwhile,
Yeah,
HMC Machine Works, if you follow Jim, he was rich with the turkey bounty,
yeah,
putting his kids on turkeys, his friends on turkeys,
yeah.
taking turkeys with bows. So congratulations, Jim.
So we need to figure out what his guide fee is and
Yeah.
start saving up, huh?
I know this starts to be the reason like people do collaborations. You're like, oh yeah,
Mhm.
collaborate would be great. Let's opening finish it
Let's,
opening day. Like
yeah, let's sweeten the deal up a little bit. Yeah,
sweeten the deal.
yeah.
Yeah, man. Okay, so basically we are on a theoretically new schedule. We're trying something new. You have some time availability that you didn't before. So hopefully we will be able to start recording and having these conversations again.
Yeah. I was trying to figure out the system that would work for us recording with
Yeah.
my shop being so loud. The system is I need to just come home and record, which is what I'm doing right now, but I need to have a more permanent setup over here, or more just ready to go setup,
Yeah.
better audio quality and stuff, which I once that dawned on me, I was like, yeah, that's why we haven't been recording. I've just been
Yeah.
trying to force it into the shop and I can't get
Yeah.
it to work. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Cool. We'll figure it out. Guys, thanks for listening. As always, we appreciate you. Drop us an email or comment. Let us know if there's anything you want us to chop up.
you bet. Thank you guys. Peace.
All right, man. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, later.